Welcome back on this Monday to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Jim Coyle with you as always, joined now by Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Star. Just finished up talking about the Indy 500 coming up, but also he has spent his last several days up in Chicago at the NBA Combine, which is a prelude to the draft coming up. How many people were in the Combine, Dustin?
What, 60? Somewhere in those lines, maybe 70, 80. I mean, it's got to be like
okay, so it's pretty close then to the full amount of the first and second rounds.
Yeah,
draft picks.
It's more than that. Because obviously you got to have enough for a lot of those guys are going to go undrafted, obviously,
right.
And a lot of them are also going to leave. A not small portion of the guys that were there are going to pull out by the May 31st deadline. I think Zach Edey will. I'll be really surprised if he doesn't.
Be shocked.
Situation and decide that he needs to come back.
But I didn't think you had to. I thought you could stay in the draft and still pull out afterwards. Is that not changed?
I don't. You might be able to from the NBA standpoint, but no, the early entry deadline is still May 31st to get back in. That's the NCAA deadline. So I don't know what would happen.
To get back into college.
Right. So because obviously at some point you have to tell your coach that you're coming back. And he can only keep that roster spot open for so long, and not try to fill it. So they think May 31st, I think, is fair. And so, Edey said, like, I'm going to take all the time. And I think what Edey is trying to do more than anything else, I mean, like, do I think in his heart of hearts he's probably out already? Probably. But I think he is also trying to lay the groundwork.
Yeah, I don't think he was ever truly in. I think it was just hey, let me go through this process. Let me hear what they have to say. Let them tell me what I need to work on to get better, because he needs to be a first-round draft pick, I think, when he comes back, or try to work on that, because that's a lot. It's just more money. It's the better contract.
It's the guaranteed contract. That's really the piece that's important, is that, you don't want to leave with time to go if you're not guaranteed to be on a team. Whereas first round draft pick, you're guaranteed to be on a team. So, but at some point you also just have to go. I mean, I think like in Trayce Jackson Davis's case, it's not a guarantee that he's going to be a first round pick, but I think everyone generally presumes he's going to go in the first 40. And at the very least, you're a priority second rounder. And that puts you in a position where you can almost safely say you're getting at least a two-way, which I think would be a perfectly fine scenario, for Trayce Jackson Davis. I don't think the worst thing in the world would be to, if he ended up spending some time in the G League. And now he doesn't have to do that. He might find a place where he really fits. But I think, ultimately he's starting to view himself as a small ball five. If they want to develop him into a four and, add the 3-point piece, G League makes sense, because I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for him to go play somewhere where results don't matter. And he is sort of encouraged to shoot, because no one cares if you win or lose. It's about development. That wouldn't be the worst thing. But I also think, just from we did like a press call with Jonathan Gavoni and Bobby Marks, and he was just talking about just the, like his passing really stands out. A lot of, parts of his game really stand out. So even though he's a bit between a 4 and a 5, there's a lot of little things he does, and he can be a role player right away. And even if he never gets the 3-point thing settled, he can be a really good backup 5 in the league for a long time. And so if a lot of other things go well, so he can be that either way. And he can, like, I don't think he's going to feel like, man, I really should have used that 5th year. Like, I don't know that a lot would have changed. I think he would have been in the same scenario, and because he was trying to win, he would always be trying to win at Indiana. So it's not like he would suddenly decide to go into year 5 and say, this is going to be the year I shoot threes. He didn't do it any of the previous 4 years. He wouldn't do it in year 5. So, like it makes sense to jump at this point. And again, if you're top 40, you're in good enough shape. Someone's going to pick you. Worst case scenario, you're probably on a two-way, so you're in pretty good shape there. Whereas if you're not sure you're going to be a second round pick and second round pick is your best case scenario, then it makes sense to come back because, again, that doesn't guarantee you that you'll be on an NBA roster by the time October comes around. And so you could be in the G League. You could, find yourself trying to scrap for a gig in Europe. So it doesn't make, when you have another year on the board to make an impact, it makes more sense. But I think he has a chance to lay some groundwork. I think the most excited thing the thing that was most sort of exciting to him was how he performed. One of the agility drills is kind of like box drill where you got to just sort of like run to the front of the lane, to the back of the lane, sort of like sidestep around the lane. He put together a pretty good score of that for a guy his size, and he did, his measurement showed out as pretty legit at 7'3", 306, 7'10" and a half wingspan. It's like, this is a very, very large human, and he just wanted to show he could move at all, because that's the biggest fear, is that you can put him in the pick and roll, and if you do, that you're just going to, just cut him up. And his goal is to be able to show a team that he can play pick and roll defense and not be embarrassed every single time. And he feels like, I think, that he's starting to lay groundwork for making people believe that it's possible.
And both Jalen Hood-Schifino has all along been considered a first round draft pick. It's whether or not he can bump himself up to the lottery or not. And he's been kind of up there, down. We'll see. What was the word on Jalen up in Chicago, your days up there?
I mean, he didn't do a lot.
He did a lot less than most people, and by that I'm saying taking tests, and he didn't take many of the tests, did he?
I don't think he took any tests at all. I didn't see him on the floor, and he didn't come out with his group that he was listed with. So I mean, I think he's in a scenario where he knows he's a first round pick. I don't know that he can get. I guess he can get into the lottery. It's all about fit. I mean, I think it happens to be the case where a lot of these teams aren't looking for lead guards. A lot of those guys are kind of set with them, but he can fit with several teams as kind of a backup option at this point from like 15, 16 down. And I think that's just kind of where he is now. The good part about that is the good chance he gets to play for a winner, right away, and gets to build up that way as kind of an understudy for some people. Golden State, I think, is one team I've seen them connected to, and obviously if he gets to start his career as the backup for Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Jalen Hood-Schifino, Steph Curry, and play alongside Jordan Poole and kind of that second unit, like that's not the worst place in the world to be. And play with Vincenzo and those type of guys and play after Clay, that's a pretty good starting spot. And so I think there's some others where he would sort of fit as, and again, walk in and be the backup second string point guard, on day one and be able to kind of run his own unit and then eventually, lead up to being a starter, eventually. I think he's in pretty good shape there. So I think everybody kind of knows what his deal is, and I don't know that there was a lot that he had to prove. He's safely a first round pick, and I think it's just a sense of all you can do is kind of hurt yourself, whereas Trayce had something to prove, and Edie certainly had a lot to prove. Jalen didn't have very much to prove at all.
A comment by Philip says that Jalen Hood-Schifino might want to be later in the first round as opposed to a lottery to get drafted by a good team, but that's I understand that, but there's a big financial difference between being in the lottery and not being in the lottery. And I think that's what people are missing. $12 million guaranteed is different than roughly $5 million a 2-year contract that's not guaranteed, right? That's right. The difference, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, you're still guaranteed in the first round. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But yeah, I mean, he's in good shape. He's in good shape either way. I think, I think he's going to be more in the 15 to 22 range, is sort of where he sets out. And that's a healthy place to be. It's not like end of first sometimes, you can find yourself buried on a good team, at the end of the first round, because they don't really need anybody, maybe they need a role player or somebody like that, but more likely when they're looking to build their teams, like somebody like Boston. Well, that's right. Boston's not picked because the Pacers have their pick, but like, I'm trying to think of who's going to be, towards the bottom of that round. Like if you're Denver's pick, or if you're Milwaukee's pick or whatever, like there's not a whole lot of room for you to step in and make an impact. I mean, Jordan Nora got buried as an early second round pick in Milwaukee and got a chance in Indiana. So you can go on a ready-made, championship level team and not get a real chance. But I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is going to be on a team that's good, but not too good that doesn't need something, and so that's a nice place to be. Is he's going to be on a team that made the playoffs, was a postseason team, but is not, needs a few pieces before it's championship level, and he's not going to be the one guy they bring in. Like they're not going to put all of their eggs on him being the guy that takes them to the next level, but he's going to have an opportunity to make an impact on a good team right away. Even if it's just second unit stuff, and maybe he's not a major piece of the rotation by playoff time, but during the year, he's going to have a chance to make an impact and sort of build his way towards being the guy that's running the show.
And he's someone who's going to need tutelage, and he's going to have to grow. I know that he played very, very well. Xavier Johnson's injury, I hate to say it like this, but it was the best thing that could have happened to Jalen Hood-Schifino. If that injury doesn't happen, I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is probably at Indiana maybe for another year. I'm not sure if he goes or not. He doesn't have the look. He doesn't get the opportunities that he got all season to grow, because he definitely grew during this season.
It's just the amount of decisions that you get to make. It's just, we obviously went in talking about, okay, how are Xavier and Jalen going to play off each other? And what the bottom line is that it means is you play a certain amount of possessions on the ball and a certain amount off the ball. Now there's certain things he'd be able to prove by like, hey, like I can step off and, still make an impact, but you grow with every decision you have to make. When you're in the position where you're running pick and roll and you've got to decide whether you're pulling up for three, pulling up from mid-range, making the pass, going to the hole, like the more that you're in that position to make those reads, the more you put that on tape and show what you can do and how good you can be, and just how you can direct an offense. And so like you put a lot of that on tape, and then, NBA teams are much more interested. Like when it's just, you cut in half, like imagine you cut in half the amount of decisions he had to make this year. Like you don't feel like you have nearly as much of a track record. So I could see how the NBA would be like, we'd like to see more from you. We'd like to see you run a team. And, he has to run a team. He had to be the guy that was giving you all the perimeter points. Sometimes, he had games where, he had scored 2 points and games where he scored 35. Well, that tells you though a little bit about a point guard. It's like he only he had to know when it was time to feed somebody else, and he had to know when it was time for him to go take over. And that's an important thing for a point guard to learn. So, he had to learn that and had to show that over the course of the year. He had to show when he had to be the guy, and have an understanding of when that is, and, how you're being defended, what they're giving you, taking that shot, and, again, when to defer. And he did a really good job of doing that. So, I mean, he had a lot of opportunity to grow, and he came out and said this. I mean, we asked him about, like, I was like, what were the leaps you think you had to make? And that was the first thing he said was like, well, when X got hurt, I stepped up. And so, yeah, there's a good chance that he would still be at Indiana if they had to go through the double point guard thing for a whole year. And because he was in a position where he had to be the point guard, the lead perimeter scorer, really the second guy, the number 2 scorer by a long shot, after Trayce, like that gets him a lot further.
And speaking of Trayce, he is someone who definitely needed to help himself at the combine, and more so just showing that he has a few more tools in his basket than some people think he does. There was talk of him that he was putting shots up, and he was actually doing fine shooting the ball. So did he help himself at this draft?
Yeah, he did. I mean, there's more that he could have done, I thought, but like, um, I think it was valuable just to show that he can make a jump shot, that it's possible. Like he wasn't spectacular in the shooting drills, like he wasn't like top 10 on the board or anything like that. But he hit threes. I mean, he showed he can make a 29-foot jump shot. Undefended. Running around. Like there's just the simple fact that he has that range with his jumper. It's not like getting to watch it. I mean, there are some hitches in it, like where his release point is, like it's not, the most by the book I've ever seen. But it's possible for it to go in. It's just like, all right, like it's conceivable that he can develop shooting range, and you do need to be able to be a threat. You just have to be able to be defended, like it just has to be a scenario where when you get the ball at the top of the key, if you pick and pop, someone has to follow you. Like you can't drop two guys and leave you alone and it'd be okay. Like that's the biggest issue is you don't have to hit 50% of your threes if you're Trayce Jackson-Davis. You got to be able to just pick and pop and hit the occasional one. Like you don't even have to hit 40. If you hit 30.
That was the case when he was in Indiana. And I'm not talking about 3-pointers. We're talking about 12 footers. If he could have just done that occasionally, that would have changed Indiana's offense a lot.
It would have. I mean, I guess his argument. So I asked him, like obviously it was nice because I have the background, having covered him enough to be able to say, the specifics. Whereas like most of these other guys, I'm running around for Pacers reasons and asking stuff that I don't nearly have the background on. But Trayce, I obviously did. And I was like, all right, Trayce, and he rolled his eyes at me when I asked. But I said, every year we asked you, we said you were going to shoot 3-pointers, and every year it didn't happen. What's you're going to be asked about that? What's your answer going to be as to why it didn't? He said, I just didn't see it. He said, I was never told not to shoot. He says, but like I'm scoring 65%, making 65% of my shots around the rim. And he's right. I mean, he got 75% of his field goal attempts last year were at the rim, so within 5 feet. And he's 65% there, and he's like, I'm making all those shots, and I'm dragging in defenders and demanding a double team every time. So, and then I'm throwing stuff out, and Trey Galloway's shooting 45% from three because he's getting open shots because I've got that kind of gravity. So it was better for us, and so I have a hard time arguing with that. And I'm sure there were more threes for him to hit. I mean, I think the thumb injury, obviously, I think held him back too, because I think when he was dealing with that at his back as well, I mean, I think he thought, during the non-conference portion of the schedule where he could have chucked a few, I think he was like, yeah, I don't think I'm ready because I'm not healthy. But his point was like, look, like I'm way more efficient around the rim. What's the point of me just chucking a few threes? Like, what's that going to do? How much is that going to help me? And I don't know how much it would have helped. I think it would have made a slight difference, but I mean, like he wasn't going to go out there and hit 40%. So, if he would have shown he's a real threat from three, then that would have helped his cause a lot, and that would have helped Indiana a lot. But if he was just going to hit 25% of them, like, is that worth the trade-off? I mean, like the wasted possessions. And I think he just ultimately viewed, in fairness, that Indiana was too frequently in a position where every possession mattered. That giving a possession away gave you a chance to lose a basketball game. And so his thought was, like my best bet of getting points on the board is getting in there, and either I get a 2 or I kick out for 3 and find somebody who's better equipped to hit it. And so if I just command that much gravity, we got a better chance of winning. And I have a hard time arguing with him. Trayce is a really smart basketball mind, and it stands out when you talk to other guys at his level because like he really is beyond most of them from an intellectual level. He is a very, very smart basketball mind. He gets it. And that's going to sell well for him at the draft. Like I don't think until you see it up close, you don't realize how important that is. Guys that get it, understand systems, understand plays, understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. Like that goes a long way to making a good locker room, making a good player. I mean, like, he is advanced as far as that's concerned. Like, he is really next level. And so he's going to fit. And so I do think, and I asked him the flip question. I was like, do you think that's a selling point for you, that you can tell coaches, hey, like, yeah, I know you guys wanted me to shoot threes. That wasn't what was best for my team. I did what was best for my team. That's who I am. You know, that's who you're drafting if you get me. And he said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to sell here. But like, I mean, I asked that question because I believe it, you know, that like, I do think he's going to be able to sell the fact that he cares more about winning than he does about his own draft stock. And I think that will play well for an NBA franchise. It won't lead to him to being a lottery pick. But, you know, I do think that whoever picks him late first round is going to be a winner. Probably won't be giving him a ton of minutes right away, but, you know, will have a role for him, is going to be happy they had him, because he's going to improve, you know, he's going to improve their team dynamic as a whole.